Good morning, everybody. Welcome to show one on this lovely, actually kind of cloudy Thursday morning out here in West LA. This is Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. I'm Dan Vespris at Dan Vespris on Twitter at Old Man Squad. Follow the Old Man Squad feed because it'll follow you back. Make sure to hit the like button before we get into anything on today's show. But I am very excited to bring on a first-time guest here on Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball, Kayla Fonte. What's going on, Kayla? I have feel like okay. So first of all, welcome. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you for
coming
having me.
on. This is I have to do this preface, and I feel like such a dum dum. You are not an old man, and people keep asking me like, are non-old men allowed to be part of the Old Man Squad network? And I have to explain it has nothing to do with the people on the network. It's the fantasy team I'm drafting. And so now I can at least be like, oh, look, there was not an old man on the network. So anyway,
Yes. In fact, I am the complete opposite.
that's right.
Literally.
You are a young woman.
Yes.
Everyone is invited to the Old Man Squad network. I didn't think that part through when I named the damn place.
It's a great name, though. I love it. Even the logo is just fantastic.
The logo's so good.
The cane is amazing.
Shout out to Sean McKee for designing that. The guy dunking with a cane. I just like every time I look at it, I burst out laughing. But Kayla, again, thank you so much for coming to the show. I started and then I was like, I feel like I need to explain this one more time. Kayla, you can find on Twitter at Kayla_Fonte. It's Fonte is the last name. You are a co-host of Between Two Hoops.
Yes.
You work, you're the department manager at Last Word on Sport. What am I missing anything? You're a fantasy basketball, obvious, die hard. I mean, that's the given. That's the given here. And you are a bringer of fantasy targets, perhaps most importantly for today's show. And as I've been saying when other guests have come on the show, these are the episodes where I just let go of the wheel. So, Kayla, the floor is yours. Where do you want to go first? Who's the first player that you're looking at that you want to talk about?
So before I get into that, I will say I am also launching a new fantasy podcast with my co-host Yuri Ono, Bitches Be Balling. So look out for that. But beautiful. Yes, that is everything that I am on or currently working on right now.
That's outstanding. Congratulations on the additional
Thank you.
pod. You're keeping busy over there.
Oh, yeah, with a full-time job, too. I mean, I don't have kids or anything, but it is a lot to keep up with work and all these side projects and everything.
Yeah, I complain about my children. I love them dearly, but man, I can't. My brain stopped doing the things. My brain no work good anymore once they came along. That's amazing, and I want to do more promo on what you're working on mid-show as well. So we'll circle back around to that for a kind of a double because people never hear the first one. You got to hit them with it twice. All right, Kayla, this is in no particular order, or honestly, I guess I don't know. If you have an order, feel free to go in it. But where do you want to go and why?
I think right now we'll start off with high draft picks. Okay. So James Harden and Trae Young. Obviously, they're in a bit of a similar situation here. So with Atlanta, we had the DeJounte Murray trade that happened, which created a huge hole in the Hawks' backcourt. And if we go to the Clippers, we see the absence of Paul George, who now signed with Philadelphia. So I think this just creates tremendous opportunities for Trae Young and James Harden to really take that leap. And I'm seeing them ranked pretty high. They're like late first round, early second round picks. For James Harden, his ADP is slightly lower. I get there are those injury concerns, his age, but I think that he has late first round potential. What are your thoughts? Do you agree with me?
Yeah, I love James Harden this year, and I was blown away that his first Yahoo rank was whatever it was, like 25 or 26 or 24, I think. He was barely in the second round. It's been moving up, and that's probably our collective fault as analysts for yelling about how he was idiotically low. I would actually, I know this is going to sound nuts. I might take Harden over Trae Young. Is that insane?
Maybe a little bit. I think they're both going to have late first round value, though, so I don't see it as totally crazy. But I do like Young just a little bit better.
So what is your plan of attack with players like Harden and Trae Young? Since you kind of lump them into one. Harden, a little bit better with shot blocking, a little better with rebounding. Trae probably superior. I would think he probably scores more than James this year. Would any one thing lead? You said you like Trae a little bit better.
Mhm.
Is that in terms of head-to-head roster build? How do you decide where you go with these players after you potentially have them on your team?
Well, the reason I rank Trae just a little bit better is because of his age. Obviously, Harden is, I think, 35. He just turned 35 recently. So that's why I do slightly have him above. But I think that overall, especially offensively, I think that Young will have the better stats by slightly. That's just my thoughts. But with both of them, though, especially in a category league, you're setting up yourself very well for assists by just drafting those two. The defensive categories is where they lack, but that's what I would target in the next round to make up for that.
Do you, thinking more, I guess, do you prefer head-to-head or roto before I ask my
I
next
actually
question?
haven't tried Roto yet. I've only been playing a
Oh,
few years, so I'm still getting into it. I'm only 22. So I'm
oh,
working
great.
myself into. I'm trying to experience everything and play all the different settings. Roto is one that I want to try to do this year and get more comfortable with it. I'm looking more at like cats, points, head to head kind of thing.
So if you're looking at the 9 cat side, just thinking
Mhm.
about the team build stuff again to kind of loop back around to it, how do you prefer to make your next play? Say, like, are you trying to pair these guys together towards the end of the first, beginning of the second? Are you thinking I'll get one of these guys and then what direction do I go from there? I know like most folks do play head to head, so
Mhm.
I've heard both sides. I've heard folks say, I end up with Trae Young. I want to get like Domantas Sabonis to cover up some of the
Yes.
lacking big man side. And I've heard other folks say, give me both. Let me just lean hard into the guard stuff and try to get great at 4 categories right out of the chute. How do you prefer to move strategically from there?
Yeah, so it kind of depends on the league that I'm doing. Sometimes I like to try out different things, but I do like to pair them in the categories that I'm lacking. So for the first few rounds, I want to create a very balanced team. And then as I go throughout the draft, sometimes I will punt some categories, depending. Usually turnovers, the efficiency ones, those are more commonly punted. But to begin with, I do like to have a little bit more balanced and then target certain categories
I
down the
far
draft.
prefer that, by the way. I far prefer
Mhm.
what you're saying. And actually, the last mock show I did on this feed was I'm just finally going to take the guys I like. I'm going to go values because everybody keeps saying, like, what do you do from here? How do you punt this one? How do you? I
Mhm.
prefer, like you said, to get through probably 3 picks before I look and say, okay, is it time for me to just give up on this category?
Yeah.
Because it's too late to maybe make up for it. Because like I get it, a points assist, they're harder to get after the first couple of rounds. If I'm lacking in one of those, you can kind of push them off to the side. Whereas, I get it. You take this player who's weak in a particular category. It's very easy to just say I should not bother with that. But you don't know what players are going to get to you in the second
Mhm.
round, in the third round, and these are the guys that make that big positive impact in things. So I am inclined to agree with you on that one. I think we've maybe moved as a fantasy industry too far into I have my first round pick. I must punt
Yep.
this immediately. Do you agree with that?
Oh, for sure. I think that a lot of people too, like when they head into a draft, their first thought is, okay, what am I going to punt? That's not a strategy that you have to imply every single time that you go into a draft. I don't want to intentionally lose categories, at least at the get go. Obviously, like a lot of things can happen in drafts, and you have to be able to be flexible and adapt to the situation. But I don't think that's the right mindset to go straight into it with a punt.
There is literally one player in the first round that if I end up with him, I'm like, okay, I am going to punt this thing. And it's Giannis in free throws. But every other player
Yeah.
in the first round, I think you can see who's on the board for you at second, third round, and then assess from there. And it's in Roto, you're probably trying to cover up all your deficiencies anyway. Talking to Kayla Fonte. Kayla, where do you want to go next? We've covered Trae, we've covered Harden. Are you moving chronologically down the board?
So now I'm going to go with a couple of other Hawks. So we can't
Ah,
not talk about Jalen Johnson. He's going to be amazing this year. A lot of people are expecting for that second leap to come along. And I think it's definitely possible with the absence of DeJounte Murray. I think he's going to be the second option offensively. He did have injury issues last year, but if he stays relatively healthy, I think it's totally reasonable to expect a boost in production and that second leap.
how big of a boost are you hoping for out of Jalen?
I want to see maybe like top 40, top 35 value. I think that's definitely easy for him, but I think he can also slightly increase his stats a little bit more. Like I said, it's just that hole of DeJounte Murray that's going to be so significant.
Would you feel comfortable taking Jalen Johnson, say, around 30 or too early for you?
That's slightly early. I would target him at about the 4th right now.
Okay. Do you think he gets to you there?
I hope. Honestly, in most of the drafts that I've done, it's been the 4th round.
Interesting.
Where he's been going. Yeah.
Huh,
sometimes 3rd, but I mean, I get it. I totally get it.
Yeah, I kind of keep going back and forth a little bit on exactly how much I expect to jump. The minutes were already at 34. So things like steals, blocks, rebounds, probably relatively consistent. My hope for him is mostly just a big uptick in what he gets to do on offense. He was at 12.5 shots a game this year. I think even, I don't know, conservatively, we can expect another 1.5-ish shots per game. Is there room for more? Maybe. But I'm very much with you there. And I almost feel like, and maybe I'm crazy on this, so feel free to jump in and just steer me in a different direction. But it almost feels like we collectively assumed he was going to be the buzziest name on the board. And he's only turned out to be like kind of the buzzy name on the board. And there's even room for more hype on him. Is that, I mean, am I reading that okay?
I would say so, yeah. The hype around him, like, it's been there, but not to the extent that I thought. Like, because obviously there are a lot of other guys as well, like Immanuel Quickley, for example, who is also on my list. Like, he is the talk right now.
Do you want to go to Quickley next, or you want to go to the other Hawk next?
well, it doesn't matter to me. Let's go to Quickley. Why not? Because we're already talking about him.
Yeah, you segued right into it. Just keep
rolling.
I
set myself up for it. Exactly. All part of the plan. So my co-host DMAC, one of his hot takes actually was that Quickley was going to have top 40 value this season. And I could not agree more. I am from Toronto, so I have to be high on all the Raptors here. But Quickley, I think he's going to be fantastic. I've seen him go roughly in about the 4th round, sometimes 5th, more so the 4th. But I think we could just expect amazing things from him this year. Like, after he was traded from New York to Toronto last season, he looked like a different person. And the Raptors are in this rebuilding stage right now, and they're going to really want to just continue to develop young guys like this. He's going to start, obviously, and it's so exciting that we're going to have a full season of him this year.
Yeah, I mean, getting out from whatever was going on with Tom Thibodeau was pretty magical for Quickley. He put up monster numbers when a couple of Raptors were hurt down the stretch last year. He was top 25 last, I think, 20 games of the season, something like that. I don't think we expect him to be quite that high with Scotty Barnes back in the mix. But, the funny thing is, like, top 40 is not that insane of a hot take from, by the way, fellow Dan. I know he goes by DMAC, but fellow Dan. So, and there are a lot of Dans.
There are Dan Titus as well.
Dan Titus as well. Dan Palio, Thunder Dan, which is why Adam King started Between Two Dans podcast, which I think I'm on a Between Two Dans coming up later on today.
That's awesome.
How do you see Quickley in the pecking order in Toronto? Is he the number 2 guy behind Barnes?
That's what I would think, number 2, because Scotty is obviously number 1. But I think Quickley will step up to be the number 2. And I think that's a role that he'll be able to thrive in. And it's going to benefit us as managers as well if we draft him.
How early would you feel comfortable taking him?
I want to say 4th, maybe even late 3rd. But I'm aiming more for the 4th. Yeah.
So like 40s territory.
Early 40s. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And the nice thing is, I know you said he's been going a little bit early for you. I typically have seen him get into the late 4th, early 5th range, like kind of going near 50, which is nice. It feels like, talking to Kayla Fonte again, it feels like a little bit of his upside is baked into this possibility that any one other player goes down. He's this interesting type where you're like, okay, if everybody's healthy, he was, and I know the Raptors were only healthy for like 9 games after he got traded to them. So my apologies to you, Torontoan. but he was like kind of around number 55 range when the team was fully healthy last year in that limited sample size. And as soon as anybody went down, then he was 40. And then one other player went down and he was top 25. And the nice thing I found with Quickley is he seems comfortable stepping into additional role anytime it's available to him. Like a lot of guys, I was talking about this on a show, I think late last week. Sometimes a player goes down and another player has an opportunity to take some of that extra usage. And they're like, nah, you know what? I'm fine. Just kind of doing what I've been doing. Quickley is not that guy. When someone else is down, he's like, I'll take those 4 shots. Send him over me. I got you. Which I think may have been because Tibbs never let him do anything in New York. And it was like anytime he was on the court, he wanted to do everything, right?
I think he just really wants to prove himself.
Yeah.
And he's going to do a great job of stepping up, and he's always willing to take on that greater workload. And injuries are obviously going to happen throughout the season. We can't say to who or for how long, but those will be the opportunities where he really shines the most. Great. I'm really looking forward to drafting him this year if I can get him.
Do you like, and I know you have a list and I'm taking us off course here. Do you like anything else going on in Toronto from a fantasy perspective? Any other values you feel?
RJ Barrett. He is also on my list. I play more so point leagues. This year I am doing more cats, but obviously RJ Barrett is ranked a lot higher in points leagues because of those efficiency concerns and things like that. I think when I was looking at #basketball, he was ranked at about 50 for points. And then for categories, he was outside the top 100. But I still think that even in category leagues, he has the potential to surpass 100 value. Because like I mentioned before, the Raptors are going to be really committed to playing these young guys like Barrett and Quickley. They're going to give him the opportunities. And Barrett looked really good with the Raptors last year. And now we're going to have a full season of him as well in Toronto.
What did you see out of RJ in Toronto that you liked down the stretch last season?
Just everything. Like he improved his stats, quite a bit of them. And I don't know, I just see another leap on the way. Like he looked really happy to be here. I think that's the main thing because he is Canadian, right? So I think that he just looked really comfortable, and that's what I like the most. And even Quickley, like they both look just happy, confident, and those are two things that go a long way when you're playing.
Do the Raptors currently have the largest number of Canadians that the Raptors have ever had on their roster? Because Kelly Olynyk, you got like multiple prodigal sons on the team right now.
There's quite a bit. Honestly, I have to look into that because I'm not sure, but I would not be surprised because there's quite a few, which is great to see.
That's the beautiful way to go into a rebuild, man. You go get people from your area, and you know the fans are coming out for that. I'm interested, by the way, and I'm steering you here. I've taken the wheel, so apologies for just a moment. You mentioned Hawks plural. Is there a third Hawk that you wanted to talk about?
Bogdanovic. He's another one.
Bogdan. Yeah. What the hell, man? Why doesn't anybody want this dude?
You know what? I think it's because, I should also say Dyson Daniels is another one of mine. One of my guys. Sorry, there's 4 of them. There's quite a bit. Obviously, this Murray trade was really huge. But yeah, okay, Daniels isn't coming to the team. He's part of the trade. I think that he gets the starting spot, and then Bogdanovic will be the leading 6th man. So I think even though if he is in that bench role, he still can provide really good value. There's still a lot of opportunities for him to step up offensively. He was great in that position last year, obviously with all the injuries that occurred. I think people are kind of down on him just because they are expecting him to stay on the bench, and because he's having that similar position, they don't think that he can still take that leap. Because he's ranked at about 80.
To me, like
I know, yeah.
I don't understand. I've stared at this. I'm really glad you brought up Bogdanovic. I've stared at this one for hours at this point, and I don't understand the current public sentiment towards him. He was number 63 in 9-cat last year. Like you said, predominantly playing off the bench, 17 points, 3 threes, great free throw, not a good field goal percent, but what do you expect? Steals were weirdly high, so I guess maybe that's a thing people expect comes down a little, but like DeJounte Murray's gone. There's only so many shots that Trae Young can take and only so many additional shots that Jalen Johnson can add. Bogdanovic, his usage isn't going down year over year. So why is this a dude who's getting drafted 40 slots later than he finished last season? Do you see any logic at all in this? I don't.
I don't. Nope.
Yeah, I don't understand that one either. What are you hoping to get out of Dyson Daniels? Because I actually find him kind of interesting myself. And like the small sample size last year when he started, that was when McCollum was hurt early in the year. He
Mm-hmm.
shot 38%, which feels like a number that's probably not going to be a full season mark for him. So it almost feels like his numbers were artificially depressed during his starting run in New Orleans last season. We know he's not a scorer, but he can bring some other stuff to the table.
Yeah, especially defensively. But I'm hoping for top 100 value, and that was actually one of my hot takes that Adam King asked for. So I think he can finish with top 100 value. I know a lot of people are drafting him well outside the 100, which is, understandable, of course. Like, we haven't really seen what he can do yet, but he's just poised to be a great breakout candidate.
I totally agree. He feels like, and I love all three of the players I'm about to list, by the way. But he feels like if you don't get your hands on Alex Caruso or Herb Jones, like around pick 100, take a shot on Dyson Daniels 30 picks later, and you might get probably like a poor man's iteration of what those guys do, but not that dissimilar from a fantasy stat perspective. Probably not as good of a shooter, but perhaps a slightly better rebounder. We saw that from Dyson last year. He'll get you some assists, perhaps better than those other guys. I think I actually agree with you on that one as well. And I love that the Hawks are this sort of quiet gold mine of a team. And honestly, the only player on the Hawks that I think is actually getting the hype that they deserve is Trae Young. He's the only one in my eyes where people are like, oh, I should bump this dude way up the board. And they did. And with everybody else, it's like Jalen Johnson, he's going pretty close to where he finished last year. Bogdanovic is going 4 rounds deeper than he finished last year. Everyone has completely forgotten that Dyson Daniels existed, even though he was the premier player coming back in that. I mean, if you can say it like that, is mostly picks and Larry Nance, who's the nicest man in basketball. But there's all this stuff hidden in a team that nobody wants anything to do with. And so I totally agree with you. And I love that we spent this much time on the Hawks because I haven't talked about them that much since the Hawks preview, which was like 2 months ago on this feed. I've lost track of how many names you've put out there. Do you have anybody else on the list?
Yes. I'm going to shift over to Chicago now.
Ooh, yes. A terrifying place.
It is. It really is. But 2 names from there, Coby White and Josh Giddey. And I have talked about them before, but with Coby White, I know that Zach LaVine is still in Chicago, but I just think that his future is so murky, right? It's likely that he'll get traded at some point during the season, but I really think that this is Coby White's team right now. He had that breakout last year, and obviously that was due to a lot of injuries. But after seeing what he can do, they're going to want to continue to run with that, right? DeRozan is no longer there. Obviously, they did bring in Josh Giddey, but they're going to want to continue to develop Coby White. And he's going very late in drafts, like around the 100 mark. I think he could surpass that.
What about Giddey? What excites you about Giddey?
I just think that this change of scenery is what he needs. It was a very underwhelming year for him last season with Oklahoma. Obviously, there was time with the benchings and things like that. But he's projected to start, and he most likely will because that's something that he was unhappy with back with the Thunder. But it's just that new change for him, which I think will do him good. And it can't be worse than his position last year. No. That's what I'm thinking.
Giddey is a guy that I've seen kind of getting run up the board a little bit. Where are you comfortable taking him? Because he sort of like started at 85, 90, and then now suddenly I'm seeing him go in the 60s sometimes, which he might have kind of priced himself out for me, but also like, his big issue is turnovers. And if you have a team that's not super high in them, then it doesn't hurt you as much to go that direction a little bit later on. What are you thinking in terms of overall production for Josh?
Yeah, so I would draft him at about maybe the 70s mark. At least right now, that's subject to change. But I could see him providing top 70-ish value. Not top.
Oh, like, sorry.
Not higher than 50 or anything like that, but around like 70-ish.
Are you? This has actually been the hard one for me, and I sort of delayed talking about the Bulls as long as I could. How do you handicap the Zach LaVine situation?
Yeah, see, the thing is, it's so tricky because we don't know what's going to happen. His value on the market isn't very good. So even what D-Max said on our other show was very interesting, where they're going to give him the ball. They're going to give him a lot of minutes to try and get that value back up, which could take away from guys like Coby White and Josh Giddey, which I see the concern, but I just don't really see that happening to the extent where it's going to significantly cap their value.
Would you touch Nikola Vucevic with a 10-foot pole this year?
He's not someone I aim to draft, but if he fell to me and I got a good discount on him, I would probably take the chance.
Yeah, I think I'm probably in that same boat.
Yeah.
He's been like the face of the old man squad for so long, and it's extremely disappointing that he's definitely not this year. I'm actually kind of surprised, talking again to Kayla Fonte, that he hasn't fallen farther, that he's kind of like going around where his numbers put him last year. And I don't know if that's this weird, like, two ends of the spectrum averaging out in the middle of people that want nothing to do with him because they think he's going to get traded, which is probably my camp this year. And then there's another camp of people that are like, if he's there and Levine gets traded and there's no DeRozan, like, they almost have no choice. And then that's averaging out in the middle or something. But it seems like he's going at like 55, 60, which isn't that much of a discount. He finished in the early 50s last year. Where's my Vooch discount? If I don't get one, I'm not drafting him.
Yeah, fair enough. And I've seen the same thing where he's gone about the 5th, 6th round. That seems to be like the average for him, at least for now.
This is actually part of the joy of doing the show. I didn't ask you for your list before we came on. Do you have anybody else that you want to go lightning round on?
Yeah, I'll do really quick. There's just one guy left, one main guy.
Before that,
yes.
Promo. Tell everybody where they can find you, what you're working on, all the pods, all that good stuff before we do your lightning round.
For sure. So for articles, you can find me at Last Word on Sports. That's where I do a lot of fantasy content. I have 2 podcasts, Between Two Hoops, which I run with DMAC. We're going into our 2nd year of that. Lots of content on the way. And a brand new podcast with my co-host Yuri Ono, Bitches Be Balling, which we will be launching very soon. And kudos to Yuri for coming up with that name because it is absolutely awesome.
That's outstanding. What's the content on that one?
So it's going to be mostly on the fantasy basketball league that we are running this year. We're doing an all-female one. So it'll be a lot of content from that. Just shooting the shit kind of thing. General talking, tips, waiver wire pickups, drops, like things like that. But a lot of it will be coming based off of things that happen in our league.
That's hilarious and wonderful.
Thank you.
It. All right, hit me with the lightning round before we let you go.
Okay, so finally, Ja Morant. So
this one feels more points leaguey, but
it is. But he only played 9 games last year, obviously due to suspension, season-ending surgery. And from the research that I did, he's only cracked the top 50 in value once in his career, which I think is really interesting. And I think that that's something that he could easily surpass if he is healthy. So banking on that to happen this year, I would feel comfortable drafting him 100%. Obviously, more so in points leagues, a little bit higher.
This is probably you went to the one at the very end where I feel most comfortable playing devil's advocate. Because we've seen him many times get off to these really quick starts. And then as he fatigues during the year, you see those little nagging injuries and the percentages kind of come down a little bit. Is this one, just so we can kind of properly plant our flag in it, where he's like a beautiful points league target for you and a maybe for 9-cat, or do you love him in both?
More so with points league. Okay. I feel a lot more comfortable drafting him there. I've never drafted him in a Cats league, actually.
That's probably worked out okay for you, actually. No.
Honestly, it has. Yeah, I drafted him like once, I think, in the points league, once or twice. But
where's he going in points leagues? I don't play in many of them. I don't see
about the 4th round from what I've seen so far.
Oh yeah. That feels like a nice.
Yeah,
he's going to go
appropriate.
Points leagues.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
especially if he's healthy.
Yeah,
right?
Memphis is such a weird and interesting test case. His injury, and then they pulled the plug on everything. It reminds me a lot of the David Robinson. Oh my God, this happened before you were born. That just hurt for a moment there. The David Robinson injury for the Spurs, where they were just like, yeah, you know what, our guy's out, so we're not going to bother. And then they landed Tim Duncan. Now Memphis didn't get the top pick, but one question for you before I let you go. Do you think they're going to give Zach Edey enough minutes to be fantasy relevant? I'm leaning towards no for whatever that's.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I think that he will have some fantasy relevance, like outside the top 100 for sure. But he is projected to start alongside JJJ. So I think that really helps his value already. He's someone who I would take a late flyer pick on, though. He's one of the rookies that I'm more comfortable with drafting compared to others.
Yeah, the rookie
Yeah,
class
that's the
is gonna
thing.
be a it's gonna be a bleep show this year.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
So as everybody knows, my stance from 2016 when I started podcasting in fantasy until about 2 years ago was I'm not drafting any of them. And then 2 years ago, I said, all right, I'll draft like rookie big men who aren't going to completely obliterate my free throw percent. And that's sort of where I've settled, which is why I was big into Chet Holmgren last year. Actually, it's like the only rookie I've ever put on the old man squad, and it worked. And now it's like an enabling thing where it's like, oh, I got to find one now. And I guess of all of them, he's probably got, well, maybe Donovan Clingan, but he's behind 2 centers for the moment.
Yeah.
In any event, I promised you I'd get you out of here on time. I'm starting to let it run long. Kayla Fonte, find her on Twitter at Kayla_Fonte, KAYLA_FONTE. Kayla, thank you so much for coming on the show. Your first appearance, you are officially out of the hot seat.
Thanks so much for having me. It was great.
Kayla Fonte, ladies and gentlemen, first time on Old Man Squad Fantasy Bash. First time on any pod I've done. Although, with a lot of guests, I feel like that is the perfect segue to me apologizing for taking so long. The nice one here is that Kayla's been in the industry only a short amount of time. So it's not all my, I mean, it is still all my fault, but at least it's not like a 4-year thing that I've screwed up. It's more like a year and change thing that I've screwed up. But I'm really glad that Kayla brought up the Atlanta Hawks because now we're getting a little bit more clarity. Not all of it. And interestingly, the only position on the Hawks we didn't talk about was center because we still don't know what the hell's going on with Clint Capella and Onyeka Okongwu. We talked to Robin Marks, that was 2 days ago, I think, and he said, stick with Okongwu. At some point, this domino is going to fall. I do, by the way, mostly agree with that. I don't want anything to do with Clint Capella. His ADP is way too high, and Okongwu is sort of your rare big man who isn't bad at free throws. He is a couple game minutes away from being a monster fantasy asset, and it's why we keep sticking with this thing every time we... I mean, are we really getting burned with Okongwu if you draft him at 110 and he finishes at 110? It's not exciting. It's not what you wanted, but it's not a dumpster fire. So I still like Okongwu. And basically, it's funny. The only Hawks I'm not really ending up with are the starting power or the starting point guard and the starting center, which, like, from a fantasy perspective, those are usually the 2 easiest positions on the board to just be like, yep, those are my guys. But I'm not as into Trae as Kayla is. Although, again, thinking more along the points league side, you can see where that tips that way a little bit. I just think Trae, like, in terms of head-to-head build, he makes some sense, but he kind of forces you into a couple of situations where you're like, I might need to end up punting these things, depending on what guy you get going back. There's just other guys I would rather have in the first round. The reason I think Trae is where he is not because he's a traditional like 9-cat top 15 type of player. It's because the other guys going around Trae Young in drafts don't have head-to-head appeal. They're great basketball players. Donovan Mitchell, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Anthony Edwards, Domantas Sabonis. I'm thinking of early second-round guys now. These guys are great, but they don't have that head-to-head appeal that Trae Young does, which is, okay, look, if you remove Trae's worst categories, suddenly he's actually a very good fantasy player. If you're punting field goal and turnover last year, Trae Young was the single biggest leaper from a punt standpoint. It was Trae and then LaMelo Ball and then Luka Doncic if you were punting those 2 things. And Luka wasn't as bad in field goal percent, so that's why those other guys jumped higher than he did. But Trae Young jumps from, mid-third round to mid-first round, and then he becomes a lot easier to build around. Now, you don't have to punt those 2 things. It just becomes more of a plan. Now, Trae Young, again, flip side of that is I probably don't basically ever draft him in the first round in Roto because you don't want to incur the hit in the bad categories. Certainly not 2 of them. You can kind of handle 1, but 2 is an awful lot. But I love Jalen Johnson. I might even go higher. I didn't, like, there was no way for me to play devil's advocate. That would have been like angel's advocate. Like, Kayla, you like Jalen Johnson. You could like him even more. He's a guy that finished at 43 in 9 category leagues last year. The injury thing was weird, and I'm a little worried about it, but he's still super young. So I'm hoping that that's a thing that was more of a blip and not a theme. But you could see the free throws get better. You will almost undoubtedly see the scoring, the threes get better, the assists probably get a little bit better because there's just going to have to be more ball in hand for Jalen. And again, if he fixes the free throws a bit, then suddenly the percentage becomes sort of like a combined positive instead of right now a combined small negative. I could see him climbing into the 20s. How far into the 20s, I don't know. Probably late is your target there. I don't know about mid or higher. But he's one of those guys where you're like, I honestly don't know how good this could be, but I do pretty much already know how bad it's going to be. And so if you're getting him at 30 something, 32, 33, 34, 35, Kayla said she's been able to get him in the late 30s, early 40s at times. And I have seen that once or twice too. A worst case scenario for Jalen Johnson is what happened last year. His floor is 45. That's an amazing guy to be able to get in the 3rd round or even better, the 4th. I think maybe the reticence with Johnson at times is, oh, is he so buzzy we've priced him out? I don't think so. Because if you draft him at like 35, like, okay, maybe I don't think he's going to go all that much higher than this, but he's also really not going to go much lower. Sometimes it's okay to take an easy win. And there's a little bit of upside built in on that one. I think Dyson Daniels could be fun this year as well. I'm inclined to agree with basically everything she said about the Atlanta Hawks on today's show. And I'm grateful that Kayla carved out some time to come aboard and talk us through a team that we probably needed to sort of cycle back to. And I got Jalen Johnson in the industry 9-cat roto mock we're doing right now because he's also pretty good across the board, except for last year free throws. In any event, this is a good segue for me to say we're going to do a mock a little bit later on today. We're also going to have an episode of Between Two Dans. Adam's got that one cooking. It'll be me and a non-Dan secret guest, not named Dan, on Between Two Dans later today. That'll also be available on our YouTube feed. So if you're watching on YouTube, just like there, Between Two Dans podcast does have its own traditional pod feeds, Apple, Spotify, all that stuff. But again, if you like and subscribe to our YouTube page, you'll get all that stuff in one convenient locale. I am Dan Vespers. Thanks again to Kayla Fonte for coming on. She, once again, on social is Kayla_Fonte. I am at Dan, BESBRIS, at Old Man Squad. Drop a follow. Remember to like, rate, subscribe on your way out. And please, if you have thoughts on anything we talked about today, a pleasantly worded comment is always appreciated. Even if you disagree, just do it respectfully. I'm happy to answer questions there. We'll talk it through. It's all fun. We're talking fantasy sports at the end of the day. Have a lovely middle of your Thursday. We'll see you guys in the afternoon. So long for now.